I played Final Fantasy X for the first time, and as you can tell by the title, it wasn't my favorite thing in the world for a multitude of reasons. My history with Final Fantasy has been fairly limited. During my childhood, of course, have heard of it, like everyone else has. Glowing reviews, a cult following, people even saying that's been one of their favorite games. Even some of my best friends I've talked to on our Discord server, they say it's some of the best games they've ever played. I wanted to get in on the fun. After all, the FOMO caught up to me. The first Final Fantasy game that I laid my hands on was Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that was a mistake. It's well known that you probably shouldn't start with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Technically, Final Fantasy VII Remake is like a continuation of the original, so you have to play the original, then start the remakes. I do think that was a marketing issue they should have cleared up, or at least said beforehand. My time with that game was also not great. The game takes place in the first area of the original game, and with that comes serious bloat, awful side missions. I had no idea what was going on at the time, and that caused me to lose interest pretty quickly. And safe to say that my intro to the series started off on a very sour note. I wanted to reset things. I wanted to go back and play one of the classics to see if maybe I just started off with the wrong game. And after doing some research, the consensus was to start off with either 9 or 10. I'm not the biggest fan of the chibi art style, so I decided to start with 10. I do think it's important to preface that I played this game on the Switch too. Now, a lot of you are probably saying, why on God's green earth did you play this on Switch? Play it on PlayStation or PC? My response would be, from the reviews I've seen, PC has an issue where in certain cutscenes, you're stuck on green screen backgrounds. And I wanted the footage to be as clean as possible, so that was a no-go. And I also just bought my Switch 2 at the time. It's only human to want to buy a game for it and play, you know? Even if the remastered version was for Switch 1. Also, I'm a physical game collector, especially for Switch games. Might as well add it to the collection. And I do have some gripes with the Switch version though. Like for one, it doesn't have a turbo mode. This game has you traversing large sections of biomes for an extended period of time. On PC, this mode exists, according to reviews and videos I've seen, but this isn't included on Switch. Why? This type of feature gating makes no sense to me. Are the hardware limitations that severe to where we can't even have a turbo mode for combat and traversal? Just seems weird. There was an instance at the beginning of the game where there was a tutorial for like fast forwarding combat scenarios, but only for handheld mode. Why wasn't docked mode included for this? Again, why? I mean, I could have missed something, but from what the pop-up on the screen told me, it's specifically for handheld mode. You had to like touch the screen itself. It seems like the superior place to play would have been PC regardless of the green screen glitch, just because of the turbo mode inclusion. I could have downloaded a mod to help fix the glitch, maybe, but I shouldn't have to mod the game to get it functional. Another route I could have gone would have been emulation. Would it have been the smart thing to do? Possibly. Was it easier to just get the game itself and also like have physical media that I like to collect? I mean, it seemed like the right way to go. All in all, the Switch version had no noticeable glitches that impacted my time playing, but I do wish they didn't platform gate certain features. I highly doubt turbo mode caused hardware limitations, especially for a game that was released on the PlayStation 2. It's safe to say that people love Final Fantasy X. They laud it for its amazing story, groundbreaking turn-based combat, and its characters. You know, the usual stuff for games that score in the 90s for Metacritic. And whenever you look up what Final Fantasy game to start with, or which one is more accessible to new players, everyone's gonna say 10. After my time playing this game, I heavily disagree. Although I do think this game is an objective masterpiece. I know a lot of you are saying that does not make sense, so I'm gonna explain. Final Fantasy X is an objective masterpiece simply because that's what the masses think. This game scored a 92 on Metacritic, and if you look through the reviews on Steam, Metacritic, wherever you buy your game, most of the scores people give are 10 out of 10s or 100s. When I was playing this game, all I could ask myself was, why am I the outlier? Why am I the only one not having fun? It was a question that kept repeating itself time and time again. To explain why, first let's get into gameplay systems such as combat, progression, and optional side content, even just before we're getting into narrative topics. After all, the gameplay systems are what I have the most gripes about. Final Fantasy X is a turn-based JRPG, and to give context, I love turn-based games. Games such as Persona, the recent Expedition 33, Baldur's Gate as well, although it is a different type of turn-based, and Octopath. I know that these games pretty much took what Final Fantasy X did, I mean outside of Baldur's Gate, but they gave it additive systems to them. If that's the case, why didn't I have a good time? There was part of a review on Metacritic that summarized my thoughts exactly. The turn-based combat felt too much like rock, paper, scissors. There were a lot of instances where the turn order was completely random. That was until I could get the necessary equipment or upgrades where I can have a specific character go first. Countless times enemies would go first, and sometimes even with multiple turns, and then absolutely blitz me to where my health is near zero or multiple characters die. And it sucks when one of those characters just so happens to be Luna or another healer, and I'm left to use my limited stockpile of healing items that may or may not save me. And better yet, after you die, you get booted back to the main menu screen. To me, it just felt unnecessary to have it be random. I understand later down the road, Titus will get haste and Hestega. You can get equipment to have you go first. You also get slow, but that is more mid-game stuff. For the first like 10 to 15 hours or so, this shit is brutal and unfun for me. And trust me, I'm not anti-difficult when it comes to games. I'm playing Dark Souls right now. I'm not against games that have only one difficulty mode, but at least make it easy for me to get into. I don't want a game where for the first 10 to 15 hours, where I'm still trying to figure out the progression path and get bent over countless times from seemingly unfair situations, especially when some of those enemies hit harder than bosses themselves. An example of this would be in Mount Gagazet's caves. Here you encounter enemies with huge health pools and certain immunities to spells and weapons. This is a case where I would much rather play another game than continue forward. Without turbo mode, these fights take a long time, way too long. And after a couple of fights that drained my MP, I ended up just escaping the fights throughout this cave system. It just wasn't worth engaging with the combat situations. And this brings me to another issue with the combat system. Combat encounters are frequent and unavoidable. What I mean is you walk in an area for about 10 seconds, then you hit a combat encounter, walk for another 10 seconds, another combat encounter, and you repeat that for the entire game. The only way to avoid these would be to use the escape feature. This is probably the worst encounter system I have ever played in a game. If you like the combat system in the game, I guess it's not that big of an issue, but from personal experience and my subjective thoughts on the combat system, it was like bashing my head into a brick wall. Let's look at Pokemon for a second here. In Pokemon, at least the games I've played, you must be in very specific areas to spark a random combat encounter. Most of the time it's in long grass areas. If you step into that, the encounter triggers. It can also trigger in caves or even bodies of water, but never completely random. In FF10, it seems like combat encounters are set on a timer when you enter an area where they can trigger. Every 7 to 10 seconds or so, it just over the top. Like, oh my god. The combat system is not good enough for that to be fun. This game from a combat standpoint was one of the games where I had to take a substantial break for a while, and that was hard. I'm not a huge channel, but I want to at least put out content on a semi-consistent basis. I mean, I want to succeed here. When a game causes me to take a step back, it hampers that from happening, and it sucks. The story of this game was good enough to where, yes, I wanted to know what was going to happen next. It wasn't a can't put it down narrative, but I was interested enough. But because I had so many issues with the combat system, there were times where it bled into the narrative itself. Maybe you guys haven't encountered this yourself, but for me, if the combat is egregiously bad or boring, that opinion bleeds into what I think of the narrative. I'm frustrated. When I'm frustrated with a game, I will nitpick every small detail with the story. I don't know why this happens, but because of it, I wasn't even having that much fun with the story, at least in the beginning. And look, I know a lot of you, even my friends, are saying, why did you keep playing the game if you weren't having fun with it? I said it before, but I think a lot of it was FOMO. Growing up around the age of like 10 to 15, I mostly played games like Call of Duty or Battlefield. I missed out on a lot of generation-defining single-player games, and when it came to the PS2 in particular, it was only games like Simpsons Hit and Run, Gran Turismo, Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper. Like there were story games here and there, but nothing to the likes of the Final Fantasy series. I wanted to experience the same memories my friends had back then. I didn't want to just take the easy way out here and uninstall the game and rethink my content pipeline for the next month. So I pushed forward. Now, this isn't to say that combat is all bad. There are some good systems in play that make you think. Going back to Mount Gogazet for a minute, here you fight Seymour in one of his multiple boss forms. Mortiorcus, I think that's how you pronounce it, who is connected to Seymour, will take his health over time and give it to Seymour, elongating his health pool essentially. Now, you could just brute force it and hammer away at Seymour without a care in the world, which I did a few times, but the game makes you think. Maybe it's best to take out Mortiorcus first, then go after Seymour, or better yet, if you have Lulu in your party, it's best to cast Bio on Seymour, so he will get damaged over time significantly, and this allows you to damage Seymour and Mortiorcus at a faster rate. Or if you feel like cheesing the fight, get all your Aeon ults ready to go and unleash them all. You can tackle bosses in lots of ways, which I do love. With that said, I had trouble with one boss no matter what I did. Make that 2 bosses because I think of them as connected rather than separate fights. And that would be the Spectral Keeper in Unalesca. Unalesca arguably being the hardest boss in the game. Even harder than Sin himself, for me. The Spectral Keeper's boss fight is fairly unique because of its movement gimmick. He lays traps in circles that characters are standing in, and to avoid it, you have to use a turn and move to a different circle to avoid the trap. Of course, this Stega is a must here to get as many turns as possible. Now, I'm not going to pretend this boss fight gave me a stroke, because it didn't. I dwindled his health enough to the point where I could summon a couple Aeons and take him out. But immediately after you progress to the next area, the Unalesca boss fight happens, and holy sh**, this was the hardest boss I ever had to go against in gaming. Including any Soulsborne games. Anytime you take a significant amount of health from Unalesca, she will heal herself. I tried using Reflect on her so Kira or Kiraga would heal us instead, but no, that didn't work. I have no idea if that was intended or maybe a glitch, maybe I'm doing something wrong, because I've read in a guide that using Reflect is key to having an easier time with this chick, but Unalesca will also cast Zombie on your party, along with physical attacks. So if you want to heal any of your injured party members, you have to take away Zombie, then heal, but you shouldn't take away Zombie on all your characters because she has a special move to where if you don't have Zombie, you will get one shot. But this means if a character is super low on health and you have no choice but to heal them, or God forbid, every single party member is low on health, you're screwed in the end because Unalesca will cast Megadeth and take at least one party member out if they aren't undead. I know this boss fight is beatable. It isn't impossible. I've watched countless videos of people taking out this absolute demon, but it feels like there are way too many things to watch out for here. She heals herself, can cast Zombie. You can't take away Zombie from multiple party members though. She will cast Megadeth and she can one-shot the party. There are just like so many systems in place here just so Unalesca can have significantly more health than the player. It just feels unfair. I give you guys permission to pull the skill issue card in the comments because 100% that's probably what's happening here, but I think this brings up another issue with the game. Progression is supposed to feel like your character is getting more powerful. You gain new abilities, increase our MP, HP, strength, etc. Every party member should feel like they have gotten significantly better. Persona 5 does this well. The player fuses personas together to create even more powerful ones with better abilities, even abilities that can one-shot enemies. I know it's not the same genre, but look at Elden Ring. It's so satisfying to complete your build fully and just annihilate bosses. I want to bring out Microsoft Paint here to better explain this. All right, guys, we have Microsoft Paint up. On the left, you have power. That's the power that you and enemies will gain over time. At the bottom is progression. So here's the start of the game. Here's the end of the game. That blue line is the power progression of the party, the black enemies. Everything is normal, but at a certain point, things change. About like right here, let's say, you'll see difficulty spikes in enemies. Ever since then, no matter how much you level up, it'll always feel like you're playing catch up to major bosses and areas in the game. When I think of good progression, I think of Dark Souls, where let's say you're at Firelink Shrine and you go through the Burg and kill those enemies. It's pretty tough the first go around, right? Well, now let's say you're at Blight Town and you want to come back up to Firelink Shrine. and kill the same enemies. Okay, let's just say that. Those enemies will be significantly weaker, and you will just plow through things because you have gained power over time. You feel powerful. In Final Fantasy, that really never happens, which makes this whole blue line of progression feel absolutely meaningless. What makes it worse is, let's say this is a major boss fight right here, and you're fighting it and you lose, right? You're bound to lose. You get booted back to the main menu. You have to manually load your save. From the save point, that's however long back, you go back and you'll probably lose again and do the same thing over again. So not only are you essentially, it doesn't feel like you're progressing and gaining power, you're just playing catch up. But when you do lose, it's just more waiting over and over and over again. It's at every boss fight. You can't even skip cutscenes. There's a lot of cutscenes in front of these bosses. In those cutscenes, you like rapidly press the A button to try to skip it, and it only skips like certain dialogue lines, not the entire scene. It's just the most annoying thing imaginable. With this game, it never feels like progression. It feels like catch up to the enemies that are in the area, or catch up to the eventual bosses that you will have to face. This is what I mean when the game feels unfair. All right, moving away from combat, let's get into the side content a little bit. Blitzball. Blitzball is divisive among players, and I'm one of the players that had no interest in playing it. You get introduced to Blitzball towards the beginning of the game in a scripted event. It's like a huge tournament with different cities of Spira coming over to compete. Before anything, I did love the setup. It felt grand and important, like I was doing something meaningful for Waka. The problem was, once we actually played Blitzball, it was genuinely awful. It almost feels like this tutorial game was meant to make you lose, which is fine, but even then, the controls were wonky. Even after the tutorial, I was having trouble understanding the mechanics, and it just felt like I was getting ganged up on every time my team even had the ball. Later in the game, this mode becomes optional to participate in within a menu at save spots. You can recruit different characters across Spira to join your team as well. The tutorial game was so bad and unfun that I just never engaged with the side activity again, which sucks because when I looked up the rewards you get when you play this mini game into endgame, Waka gets his most powerful abilities that help immensely for later boss fights. It's so defeating to know something good is awaiting you if you keep with it, but that mini game itself is so unfun to play. Part of me thinks, maybe it's just bad at the beginning of the game. It will get better. But what's the point in playing an optional minigame if you aren't having fun only up until the very end? It's baffling. Speaking of other side content, this game, from the surface, is very linear. This is a bad thing because in reality, it's not that linear. Keep in mind, everyone, this is my first time ever playing this game. I want to say, around like mid to early late game, the side stuff starts to rear its head. The most important being getting the optional Aeons. Since I never watched or read anything to imply there were any optional Aeons, yeah, I had no idea you can get them. And those Aeons are powerful as hell. Yojimbo can just one-shot enemies, even bosses. I was just following the linear nature that the game was showing me. This isn't like Dark Souls where, although the game is linear, once you get to Firelink Shrine, you are free to go as you please. Here, at the beginning of the game, it is linear. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm just gonna follow the path. Follow the path where the red dot on the minimap is showing me. I'll explore here and there, but even when I explored, it was just chests. It wasn't like something secret. Only until where I got to that big field where I have to collect all of the animals and bring it to this one guy where I was like, oh, this game's really opening up. But I didn't like the combat enough to even engage with that side content. Probably the most powerful Aeon I had no idea you could get was Anima, the same Aeon that Seymour uses the first time you fight him. I understand the whole anti-yellow paint argument going on, whatever, and I generally agree with that sentiment. But if the game presents itself as linear, like very linear, how would you expect me to think there are optional explorable areas? I only found this out until that like huge area where you can collect those animals like I was saying before. Also, I mean, when you get the ability to explore most of Spira through the airship, personally, I thought it was a gimmick to like go back and get the treasures you thought you missed, or go back to vendors who sold unique items. I never thought that would be like a way to explore side content, you know? Maybe this one's on me. I probably made a mistake or I wasn't thinking. More than likely, the game gave me hints that I could go to unique areas and acquire unique things, and on a second playthrough, I would have more fun. I think when it comes to combat and side stuff, it severely hampers my enjoyment of the game. It just always felt like it was wrestling with me all the time and doing its best to make my time with the game feel unfun. And I know this is a hot take. I know I'm probably going to get a lot of dislikes on this video. A lot of fans praise the combat that this game offers. It paved way for other games in the genre. It sets the stage for what's to come. And I think that may be the problem for me. Games nowadays just control a lot better. Gameplay is more refined this generation. And I guess it's trained me to expect things to be intuitive and easy to grasp. Older games such as FF10 are more difficult than the majority of the time. And with that comes more frustration, especially for gamers like me. I found that with older games, its systems fight with the player, whether that's camera placement, combat itself, story. The simplest way to put this would be the game was unfun from a gameplay standpoint. Most of the time you walk 10 seconds, later a battle happens, then repeat the process for the next 40 hours. And over time, that starts to get overly repetitive to the point where I wrestled with the possibility of dropping the game. And that's where most of my gripes lie. You traverse these long ass environments and get interrupted time and time again for some stupid ass fight that will either take 2 minutes or 20. This applies for cutscenes as well. Sometimes they're short and sweet and get to the point. Other times they run on and on with nothing meaningful to give to the player. Or sometimes the cutscene will stop abruptly only for you to press A to talk to the character again for the cutscene to progress. An example of this would be in Guadasalam. The player has to talk to Lulu for the story to progress, but you have to do so multiple times for no apparent reason. I did not have fun the majority of the time during the gameplay segments. It felt like a task needed to complete rather than actively getting engaged with the systems. Boss fights, regular fights, traversal, engaging with dialogue, literally all of it. But you guys get the point. So let's move on to something a little more positive. To give a brief synopsis, you play a character called Titus, a character that lived in a technologically advanced city called Zanarkand. After an attack from a beast called Sin, he's transported to the world of Spira. For me, it was unclear, but I think Titus just went forward in time. I don't necessarily think Spira and Zanarkand are two separate things. I mean, let me know in the comments below if I'm wrong. Anyways, from here, Titus forms a party and becomes a guardian for a summoner called Yuna, who embarks on an expedition to collect all the Aeons to take on Sin. Quickly, let's go over a couple of things that I don't like about the narrative and characters. For one, Titus is incredibly stupid and sounds like a Disney character when the world around him is more adult, if that makes sense. There are times, even during the middle of the game, when the plot has established itself, Titus will still ask questions the player already knows the answer to. An example I can give is when Titus pretty much tells the party, "Hey guys, don't worry, we can all do this again." And the party around him gives off an energy of, "Yeah, dude, this isn't happening again." It's a very important moment in the story, but after this, Titus just doesn't read the room at all. He has no awareness around him. He still thinks that they'll make it out alive, when clearly the facial expressions on these guys are like, no, we're probably dying after this. And I think that's the big issue with the narrative. Luna will die after she defeats Sin, like every other summoner before her. And through 40 to 60 hours of the game, Titus will only realize until late game, even though literally everyone has been giving obvious hints through the game. Titus refuses to read the room. There's also this scene, it's an infamous scene, where Titus gives a fake ass laugh, and it's the most cringe shit I have ever heard.
You probably shouldn't laugh anymore.
All right, so while editing the video and looking back that cutscene, I was wrong. That it was a good cutscene. Another one of the things that bothered me would be Seymour in general. Just his character overall. I think his involvement just wasn't needed and didn't contribute much to overall narrative. The plot points were essentially him wanting to marry Yuna, to use her and become Sinem himself to eliminate suffering in Spira. Genocide, if we want to use a more precise term. It was one of those things where it was evil for evil's sake, not really for any other purpose. I think the excuse to eliminate suffering in Spira is bad, because in no way during the game did he give any real empathy towards the people of Spira. Really? You never saw him give comfort to people in towns. You never saw him honestly do anything of real significance for people other than just be a public figure. He was just annoying to deal with and honestly wasn't even in the game that much if you think about it. You only fight him, I want to say 3 times, but his actual screen time in dialogue consists of him in Guadasalam, where he initially asks Yuna to marry him, Bavel, where you fight him again, and Mount Gogazet, where you fight him yet again, and he finally dies. Before all of that, when you talk to him, it's mostly world building and not necessarily adding to the plot in any way. In the end, I felt no real feelings towards him because I only thought of him as, I guess, a boss in combat to look forward to, rather than a character that gave me a reason to care about the story being told. And this brings me to characters, specifically the party members. During the bulk of the game, they were alright, I suppose, other than Luna, who is miles better than anyone else other than like one person. I think I'm going to organize this from who I like the least to who I love the most. And starting from the bottom, I have to say Riku is my least favorite character in the game. I guess it's mostly because she acts like a Disney character rather than a character that makes sense in the world she lives in. There are multiple times in the game where she sounds enthusiastic even when the situation doesn't permit that. Along the same lines as Titus, she isn't the sharpest tool in the shed either. One of the things that bugged me was the plot twist that she's just Luna's cousin. I was just playing the game casually and it was just like dropped on us like nothing, and the players just expected to believe it. Like even when Riku gets introduced to the party, Luna and Riku didn't have an enthusiastic greeting. They don't really have a connection with each other on screen, if that makes sense. They don't have chemistry. It actually confused me more than it added to narrative. They could have just been friends, I guess, just like everyone else, and things wouldn't have changed. It was just a weird narrative choice. Also, other than the Al Bhed potions and the occasional ultimate she provided, she wasn't a useful character for me. Her attacks were fairly weak against bosses and even standard enemies at times. She's mostly a character that you have to bring out in select fights, especially like the airship fight where you're fighting that big ass dragon thing. Also against bosses that afflict characters with specific ailments, because those Al Bhed potions are great for that. But other than that, Luna was the healer of the party, and she could cure ailments too. I just didn't see the need to use Riku most of the time. One of the more annoying parts of the game that had to do with her was during this section you had to traverse this long pathway and avoid these lightning strikes. Her character was just annoying.
Hey, whoa!
I want to go home. I hate lightning. I hate thunder.
I know it seems like I'm bitching, and honestly, it's not nearly as bad as I'm making it out to be, but like I said before, since I had such a hard time with combat and not having fun there, it sometimes affects the narrative for me. Although the one thing I did like was the small conflict between her and Waka, with her being Al Bhed and all. Waka is sort of racist for a good chunk of the game. Just from his surroundings, he was raised to despise what the Al Bhed were doing with Machina, and how that is a direct, I guess, illegal action from a Yevon point of view. This little subplot with Waka and Riku becoming close friends and overcoming that religious conflict between the two was great to witness, mostly because of how relevant this really is in today's world, and it even adds my overall feelings towards Waka as well. Kamari is probably the next on the list, and from what I've seen from everyone else, it isn't a surprise in that he's sort of disliked. It isn't because he's a bad character, it's just that he doesn't talk much. He doesn't add to the narrative only up until mid-end game with the plot point of his brethren on Mount Gogazet and so on. And for me at least, he was the character I used the least in my party. The best way I can put this would be he is a jack of all trades but master of none. It was a character that I would supplement just for the purpose of leveling him up. And unfortunately, I think that's all I can say about him. As I've said, his character arc towards the end of the game is nice, but what about the other 30 hours before that character arc takes place? He doesn't talk all that much, he just stands there and says maybe 1 to 2 lines of dialogue. Just quickly off the cuff for a second, I do love the little moment in Luna's voice recorder flashback sequence where she gushes about how Kamari was always there for her, to protect her ever since her parents died. That whole sequence with every character was super emotional for me. I just wish there was more to it during the rest of the game, you know? And this may be a hot take, but I do think Titus is next on the list. So he is above the other characters mostly because he's the main character, and with that comes some sort of attachment, some closeness to the character that you don't get with anyone else. Honestly, for about 80% of the game, he acts super dumb and overenthusiastic to the point where he sounds inauthentic.
Stop right there, goers. You guys are smiling now, but not for long.
Regardless, his character, in my opinion, was unlikable for the majority of the game. An example of this would be when Luna was essentially proposed to by Seymour. And at this point in time, regardless of how you feel about Seymour, Titus does not know Luna that well. They literally just met. But he seems to throw a fit.
Come on, let's just get on with the pilgrimage. I mean, marriage?
Jealous?
What? No way. We gotta defeat sin. Romance can wait.
Like, the game maybe started 10 hours ago. I get that maybe this could be the best moment for a love plot to start forming, but it just looks bad when it only occurs during the moment Seymour proposes. It just feels reactionary and forced almost. This doesn't mean that the love plot won't pay off later on, because, well, it does pay off. But this is an example of Titus not being smart or likable. Also, the whole thing with him saying, "This is my story," when it isn't. With all the hours I played, from my time playing, it seems like the game wants Luna to be the protagonist. Titus is just a controllable side character that pushes Luna into confidence. It made him seem conceited and overconfident, and an unlikable moment. But with all that being said, the last 20% of the game is where Titus shines the most, especially after the realization that he's a dream of the faith. And after everything is said and done, he won't be there with the other characters after they complete their mission. And after this realization, he grew up. He's more proactive with the party. He's more likable as a character, specifically when he confronts his father shortly after. It felt incredibly human and realistic. He doesn't forgive his father for being a bad parent. He's quite clear that he still hates him, but also it's still his father, and there's a sense of grief there. It stems to his father as a character as well. From Titus's point of view, he was an objectively bad father. After all, he disappeared from his life. But while Jecht was in Spira and underwent the same kind of journey as his son, he grew as well and ultimately sacrificed himself to bring calm to Spira, at least for the time being. I found the entire thing to be quite touching. And quite honestly, I think this moment nearly saved the game for me. I was just having such a hard time enjoying this game, but seeing this moment made it all worth it from a narrative stance. Did Titus's character growth make me like him more? Sure, but I do think earlier in the game he was still annoying and had the personality of a Disney character. Lulu, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. Lulu is a sterner character, acts more like a sister, hard-headed, can be argumentative, but wants the best for the party no matter what. On that sibling standpoint, this mostly goes to Yuna and Wakka. With Yuna, it's fairly obvious once you see their interactions, but with Wakka, it seems like there was something deeper there. Once you get into the later stages of early game, you find out that Chapu, Wakka's brother, was Lulu's partner. Unfortunately, he died, and she still mourns his death. So does Wakka. Their grieving is very connected, and you can see that it manifests into arguments and disagreements between the two. I think this plot point with Chapu was the most intriguing when it comes to Lulu's character, especially once we get to Guadasalam and enter the other plane that I'm forgetting the name of. Here is where we see the apparition of Chapu, Jecht, and other characters that have passed. I think here is where we get the most depth with Lulu's character.
And I am still alive. Coming here really makes that clear. I should focus more on what I have to do now.
What?
I'm not even sure what I'm saying.
Don't you mean that you should leave Chapu behind? I'm sure he was a great guy, but there'll be others.
That's a possibility.
How about Wakka?
What, me with Wakka?
Yeah, you two get along great.
Getting along isn't enough, not even close.
Oh, sorry. My mistake.
You'd do well to remember that. Knowing a bit about women might come in handy someday.
Yeah, I'll remember.
I won't be forgetting either. Goodbye, Chapu. You always said I looked grumpy. But those were the happiest days of my life.
The unfortunate part is, after this, her character doesn't progress a whole lot. It then mostly boils down to spouting exposition or giving advice to Titus and Yuna. Waka would be next. He's the type of character who may not have the best character growth or the best personality, but he's the character that you always end up liking no matter what. When you think of characters like this, think Ryuji from Persona 5, Alistair from Dragon Age, or Gale from Baldur's Gate 3. Those characters may not have the best writing at times, but their characters are so likable you can't help but love them. Waka's just a bro. You know what I mean? He accepts Titus right off the bat and takes him under his wing because we remind him of his brother. Even when Lulu was demanding that Waka let us go, he didn't listen. I mentioned before, his character arc with the Albed had its flaws, but it was a good character arc regardless. To overcome your upbringing, to get over the lies that Yevon had told, and to befriend another in which you used to hate. The message it gives was a good one, and it shows how much of a good human being Waka really is. Yuna is up here for a good reason. She's the character in which the whole story is based off. She needs to be a good character for the game to be a good game. For me personally, the reason why she's at the top of this list along with the other characters I haven't mentioned is because of how level-headed she is through the entirety of the game. But also they write her character in such a human way. She struggles quite a bit during the game, but at the same time, she still finds a way to keep moving forward. She finds reasons to smile even when the situation tells her to do otherwise. Although I think this moment is very cringe for Titus when she's the one to tell him to laugh to make himself feel better, this is just a testament for her character. She's grappling with the situation that yes, when she beats Sin, she will die. It's a given if she completes her journey. Knowing that, she takes the time to make another feel better. Or even later, Yuna cries in the lake at Macalania Woods. She's still grappling with deciding whether to complete this journey, whether it will be worth it. Titus tries to change her mind, and she initially does, but she still decides to keep going afterwards. The mindset of, I must keep going, I must keep going. I think that message is a great one. I will say there's one moment when I just didn't like her character. It's a very specific moment. It was after Seymour asks her to marry him, but it was before the moment where everyone knew that Seymour murdered his father. Yuna was struggling with the decision to take up Seymour on his offer or continue like she had been on her journey and turn down Seymour. Well, she decides that she will marry him. I use that with quotes for a reason. What she actually wants is to see Seymour and confront him on the murder of his father, but she wants to do so alone, abandoning her guardians in which it's their job to protect her. She uses like the excuse she doesn't want everyone else to get hurt, blah, 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 blah. The reason I don't like these scenarios is because not only is it predictable, it's also incredibly stupid. The player already knows that Seymour most likely won't be felled no matter what happens. It's too early in the game, and at this moment, it's a guarantee that if Yuna were to ever 1v1 Seymour, she would get f***ing rinsed. I mean, shit, she couldn't even beat the random-ass summoner on the side of the road.
Let us see which are stronger, my aeons or yours. To learn.
This whole scenario had me scratching my head. Why couldn't the party have found out along with Yuna about Seymour's murder of his father? In the grand scheme of things, it's not that important. There are other encounters with Seymour that are more memorable, but in regards to her character specifically, it felt weird for her to not tell the party. I think my favorite party member in this game, it's Auron. I mean, look at the guy. Auron has aura. I'm sorry. But Auron, I think, is the perfect father figure for Titus, and that's why I love him. Jecht wasn't there at all for Titus, really. It's why he hates him so much. Auron has a much more serious personality as opposed to Jecht. Jecht was more sarcastic, conceited, and felt like he could take on anything. That was until the end where he realized he wouldn't be able to come back to Zanarkand. Auron is level-headed, knows his power, and is the perfect parent for Titus. Without his father, Titus almost walked the same path. He can be conceited and overconfident, ignorant, but because Auron was there, he grew up faster, became a character with a full character arc. Towards the end of the game, you get to see the same journey Auron went on along with Jecht and Braska. Auron was Titus here. He was the exact same character, telling Braska that he shouldn't go forth with getting the final Aeon. And eventually he attacks Yunalesca herself and dying, in quotes. I love how his character wasn't the traditional chasing revenge for revenge's sake. It was more like Auron found out how to get rid of Sin forever. He brought the party throughout their journey, let them learn from their own mistakes themselves, and have them figure out what to do themselves, so that in the end, and eventually take down Yunalesca and to not go through with the ritual. That whole character arc I found was awesome. And not only that, he was the character I used the most during combat, I would say, along with Yuna. In the end, the party was hit or miss for me. Some characters I thought didn't add enough to combat and story. I really didn't care for Riku a whole lot outside of the Albed potion. I thought Kimahri talked too little. It dampened the potential for his character. But there were characters that were extremely well written that I actually gave a damn about. Yuna was great. That lake scene was amazing and memorable, along with the voice recording she left for the party. I'm not gonna lie, I was emotional. Auron was badass, and a great character arc to go along with him. But the character I keep scratching my head at would be Tidus, which is weird, right? He's the main playable character for this game. I should like him more than anyone else, and it honestly just boils down to his personality. He's dumb as nails during the beginning and sounds like a Disney character. His character only gets better towards the end when the character arc comes to a close. But getting to the narrative itself, in my opinion, it saved itself with the ending. If it weren't for the endgame scenes, the game would have been middling, in my opinion. And this starts with Yuna, honestly. Yuna's scenes, such as the recording flashback and the Macalania Woods Lake scene, were genuinely some of the best storytelling I've ever witnessed. The recording especially got to me for how raw it was. It's just this long goodbye letter, essentially. It perfectly gives depth to characters that need it, especially with Kimahri. That story with him being there for Yuna throughout her life was just heart-wrenching. And the hard goodbye that Yuna was trying to come up with for Tidus. That one hurt, especially after finishing the ending where Tidus was the one to go and not Yuna. And it was perfectly looped when you realize that this very moment of her recording was from a previous section earlier in the game where Tidus interrupts her. This moment genuinely made me sad. If you guys have ever played Silent Hill 2, at the end of the game, you listen to this long lettered monologue from James's wife. It was a hard listen, incredibly sad. Silent Hill 2 is a more objectively adult story, but these two moments were very similar in terms of feeling. That iconic scene with Yuna in the middle of the pond and Tidus going up to comfort her, to give her a shoulder to cry on, and eventually they have a moment. Didn't feel cheap at all. A lot of games fail to execute. Final Fantasy does an excellent job with it because it hits at the exact right moment. At this point in the story, Yuna and Tidus have been through a lot together, and the journey is coming to a close soon. This was also the moment when Tidus was in the middle of his character arc. For all this to happen at once, it was perfect. It was emotional, and it made the ending of the game much better when Tidus fades from Spira. I think that moment was what had me thinking all the hardship I endured during the game, maybe it'll be worth it in the end. And it was, but it had caveats. Tidus eventually comes to understand that he is a dream of the faith. He isn't bound to the realm of Spira. Well, I guess he isn't real at all. The real Xanarkand was the lost city we encountered later in the game. The Spira that Tidus remembers is Dream Spira. We're told that if sin is defeated, the faith no longer have to dream anymore, which means Dream Spira and those that came from that will no longer exist. I know I'm bound to have gotten some of those details wrong, but in my opinion, this entire thing was convoluted and needlessly complex. When we meet that little kid again who explains everything, I found myself pausing frequently to try and make sense of everything. At the end of the day, I do think it gives more depth towards the ending and makes it better because of Tidus's disappearance and how in the end he was the one to go and not Yuna. But during the moment of finding this out, it messed with me a bit. It felt like an artificial plot twist rather than one that left breadcrumbs throughout. And speaking of plot twists, Yevon was the real antagonist that caused Sin to come back countless more times. Yevon, the religion that most in Spira believed in. Yeah, that one. I loved this because of the messaging it gives. It was something, at least in a video game, I haven't seen tackled before, where the religion thought to be a saving grace for the world of Spira is actually the thing that is causing its destruction, physically and spiritually, as we can see with their conflict with the Albed. It's such a wonderful use of flipping things on its head, and quite honestly, I didn't expect this going into the game. I said at the beginning of the video that my first Final Fantasy game was 7 Remake, which was a terrible idea. In my opinion, that game is riddled with bloat. I thought the exact same thing would be here, but that just isn't the case. Especially during the end game, the game picks up tremendously. The narrative really starts to shine. I would almost put this game's ending as one of the best in gaming. It's that good. We can talk all day about how great the ending was. We can gush about character arcs and motivations, or we could talk about the deeper meanings within the narrative. At the end of the day, I still cannot bring myself to play this game ever again. The combat and systems surrounding it, in my opinion, were some of the most unfun, most rage-inducing, hair-ripping moments I have ever experienced in a video game. And you guys would be 100% correct for saying a skill issue. Because let's be honest, there was some skill issue. More than likely, I went about things wrong. I should have gone down a different skill tree with characters. I should have engaged more with Blitzball so I can get Wakka's best ability. I should have gotten the other Aeons so I would have an easier time later down the road. But that combat system was so f***ing unfun. I couldn't bear going through more than necessary. Walking for 10 seconds, combat. Walking for 10 seconds, combat. Even when I was wanting to escape from combat, the game would pull some dice rolling bullshit and keep me from doing so. It was so repetitive to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. But let's be honest, it's more than likely a product of age. If we look at other turn-based JRPGs, most have done away with the random encounters and random turn order. I'm relatively new to JRPGs as well, so my only experience with them is new age JRPGs. Only now am I going back, and doing so has some pain to it. It just comes with the territory. To make you Final Fantasy fans feel better, if I played this game when it released, more than likely, I would have loved this game throughout. Part of me wishes I had done so. JRPGs are what made the PS2 era for what it is. But as for right now, I don't think I'll ever play Final Fantasy X again, because Final Fantasy X was a masterpiece that I hated. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I spent a lot of time on this game. And for those of you that got through the video, that gotten through the first 10 minutes, didn't downvote, listened to my arguments and accept them even though you may disagree with them, you guys are awesome. Let me know down below things I missed, things I should take into account, try to talk me into playing this game again. Do what you need to do. So, according to my backlog, I still have a lot of time to spend on a lot more games, and if you want to support me for future videos that go into those, be sure to give a like. It'll for sure help the algorithm and get a small YouTuber like me out there and make this all worth it. Also, feel free to follow my Twitch. I'm going to start streaming my playthroughs over there, so tune in. And with that, have a good one, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully you aren't that mad at me. Have a good one.